Story 1. I was around 7 or 8 when I started getting suspicious. Santa had the same handwriting as my parents. Story 2. I told my mom I wanted a toy for Christmas, but she said it was a waste of money. I decided to ask Santa for it without telling her again. However, I still didn't get the toy. Story 3. I was 4 when I started suspecting it and 5 when I knew for sure. The conversation was actually kind of funny. I don't believe in Santa. Why not? The first example I could think of was, how do the reindeer fly? Magic. But you told me magic is from the devil. Story 4. My parents never believed in Santa Claus. It saved them time and effort because they didn't have to maintain the illusion, and it spared us the drama of the moment when a child's imagination is crushed. Instead, we always understood that gifts came from family and friends, and as soon as we were old enough to write, we wrote thank you letters to those who sent us gifts if we couldn't thank them in person. So, there was no Santa drama, and it helped my siblings and me improve our handwriting, punctuation, vocabulary, and grammar. I've always considered it one of the few things my parents did right. Story 5. When I was 7, I started to get suspicious, so my parents gave me a book called Flight of the Reindeer, which had serious-sounding evidence about how Santa was real. They got 3 more years out of me. Story 6. I don't know if there was ever a time in my life when I genuinely thought he was real. Even at age 5, I found it preposterous that a magical, overweight man could fly a sleigh full of reindeer to my house when he didn't even know me. We didn't even have a chimney for him to come down. Story 7. When I was old enough to understand why my parents were fighting at night while we were asleep about how much toys cost, and how they couldn't give us the toys we wanted, and how they had to ask my grandmother for help with the Christmas gifts. I think I was about 5 years old. Story 8. My mom was a single mother. After putting everything she had into getting gifts under the tree, no one besides her received credit and love from her kids after the fact. She always told us it was just a story. Story 9. I was 6 and saw my mother and father taking the gift from under the Christmas tree. It's better now because I can enjoy the cookies by myself. Story 10. I was 6 years old and terrified. I wondered why this man was watching me sleep. I felt I had to stay asleep, but I was afraid of what he might do to me. My mom knew, but I couldn't tell my siblings. Story 11. I realized when I was about 7 or 8 that Billy down the street got the new bike he asked for. I noticed that Susie across the street got the new bike she requested as well. I received socks, shirts, and underwear, clothes that I needed. At some point, you realize that either Santa does not exist, or he is just someone who gives rich people what they want and ignores everyone else's wishes. I personally think raising your children to believe in Santa is unkind. We teach them that he has a naughty list and that if they are bad, they won't receive what they ask for. Then, when they don't get what they requested, they blame themselves for being naughty. That's not a good recipe for healthy self-esteem. Story 12. When I was 5 or 6, we had an activity at school where we made a wish for Christmas. My brain interpreted that to mean, I can ask for anything. So I wished for all of Superman's powers. I wasn't really disappointed because I had already kind of figured out that Santa wasn't real, but I had been uncertain about it. That served as proof for me at that age. Story 13. My parents never celebrated Santa Claus. Christmas was the birthday of Jesus. I was fine going along with it for my friends and sitting on Santa's lap at the mall to get the candy cane they offered. Story 14. I don't remember the exact age. Maybe around 6. What I do remember is that when I became suspicious, I decided to test the theory. At the last minute, my brother and I hung stockings. We had never done that before. Gifts were always just placed under the tree. My hypothesis was that if our parents were providing the gifts, they wouldn't be prepared for this surprise and wouldn't have stocking stuffers. Well, Mom and Dad were brighter than I gave them credit for. They opened some box gifts and put small items into the stockings. Story 15. When my mom asked for my letter to Santa and I hadn't written it, I told her he knows. Later, I heard her talking to the neighbor about where she got the supplies. Story 16. My parents hired a Santa for Christmas that year. They had me fooled until I saw him leave in a cab. Story 17. My parents never told me about Santa Claus. I received a lot of negativity from other kids at school until about 5th grade, including from teachers because I disliked writing a Christmas list to someone I knew wasn't real. I felt like a conspiracy theorist for most of elementary school because I was the only one who knew the truth. Story 18. I was about 10 years old when I caught my mom trying to sneak presents into the living room. It was game over. I just stared at her, thinking, so, this is what we're doing now? Story 19. Maybe it's too late, but at 10, my Mexican mother left me a note from Santa that was written in Spanglish. Story 20. I was 8 years old when I caught my dad checking on me to see if I was asleep. I wasn't, but he didn't notice. I heard my parents bringing the presents down and thought, that makes sense, then went back to sleep. I never said anything to my parents until I was a teenager. I loved Christmas mornings with my little brother so much that I didn't want them to end. We had a little routine for it. We would wake up around 1:30 a.m. and rush downstairs. We would cover our eyes and go into the living room to open our stockings first. After we finished there, we would go into my dad's office where the tree was to see all the things Santa brought us. The best year was when we got a Nintendo GameCube. We woke our dad up around 2 a.m. to set it up. I got Luigi's Mansion and my little brother got Wave Race, Blue Storm. Story 21. I don't know, but I was quite young and was asked to keep playing along for the sake of my siblings. It was the Easter Bunny that started it. Once that domino fell, Santa followed, and the whole church thing came shortly after that. Story 22. Maybe 8? I think I already suspected, and I wasn't surprised when my mom gave it to me calmly and straightforwardly. I was totally okay with it. It gave me a whole new perspective, knowing that my mom and dad had to hide and then prepare and assemble things for the big morning. Story 23. I discovered the toy stash and didn't tell anyone. Those were the gifts that appeared from Santa. The amusing thing is that I kept it to myself, but when I was about 11, I saw my dad bringing in sleds that were our Santa gifts that year. He noticed that I caught him and asked if I still believed in Santa. I told him I had found all the toys a few years earlier. I had to maintain the illusion for my little brother, so I never said anything. Story 24. Maybe around 5 o'clock. My younger brother woke me up, telling me Santa was here. We left our room and peered around the corner. It was our dad putting the presents under the tree. My little brother didn't see him clearly and went back to bed believing it was Santa. Story 25. Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, and God in that order. The older I became, the more I began thinking for myself. Some people never get there. Story 26. I taught 7th grade a few years ago and had a student who still believed in Santa Claus. She also came in one day in April, horrified, because she had just learned where babies come from. I don't think that's normal. Story 27. What do you mean? That's like saying the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy aren't real. What's wrong with you trying to upset people like that? Haven't you ever seen a Hallmark Christmas movie? Story 28. I was 8 years old. My mom was driving me down to Miami to visit her boyfriend, whom I didn't like. She bluntly told me this while driving with a cigarette in her hand. I was so angry that I wouldn't speak to her. It didn't help her case that she took a drag from her cigarette, tapped the ashes out her driver's side window, and the ashes flew back in through the back seat window and landed on my arm while I was looking away. So I had my imagination crushed and a burn welt on my arm. Story 29. My mom said that the minute we say Santa isn't real, we won't get an extra present from him. I am 27 and Santa is real. Story 30. Because of the scene in Gremlins where the girl talks about her dad dressing up as Santa and going down the chimney, getting stuck and dying, resulting in a smell, my children were not allowed to watch that movie until they were much older. Story 31. I figured it out at about 7 or 8. My parents always forgot to remove price tags, and I felt there were slim chances that Santa just happened to shop at the same drugstore in our small rural Wisconsin town. Story 32. I was never told he was real, and unfortunately, as one of those who find lying unacceptable, I must inform everyone of these falsehoods. I told everyone, but they never actually believed me. Story 33. November 13th, 1988. I was 9 years old. It might seem unusual to remember the exact day, but it was when the Bengals played the Chiefs in 1988. The Bengals had the best record in the National Football League at that point, while the Chiefs were the worst team in the league. Somehow, the Bengals lost. It was quite traumatic. Story 34. In kindergarten, I was at a friend's house down the block when I saw the postal truck. It carried something to our door, but I was turned away when I asked about it. Later, I saw it through the hinge of my parents' bedroom door. I moved it under their bed that night and it was wrapped the next day. Finally, it appeared downstairs with a tag from Santa. That's how my Daisy Air rifle killed Santa. Story 35. As I entered a large department store with my mother during the holiday season, they announced that Santa Claus was landing on the roof. I excitedly asked her if we could go see him. She replied in a loud voice that Santa Claus was just a way to sell toys. Story 36. 8 to 9 years old, I was happily chatting with my mom about what I was hoping for. My dad was in a foul mood, so he pulled out his credit card and said, "That's Santa. Stop with this." Not the best way to confirm my suspicions, but it taught me a valuable lesson that I still use to this day. Story 37. I remember in first grade getting legitimately angry at my brother, who was 4 years older, for telling my parents that he knew Santa wasn't real. I told him to stop because then we might not get the best presents anymore. Story 38. 6 of my classmates and my parents officially told me when I was 7. I responded, "I know," and that was that. Story 39. I was either 11 or 12 when I found out through The Amazing World of Gumball, where there was an episode in which the mom said that Santa was not real. That thought hit me like a truck. Story 40. I don't remember ever believing. My older brother and sister woke up early on Christmas morning when I was about 2 or 3. When I finally came out to the living room, they announced that Mom and Dad were Santa. Story 41. I searched for it out of curiosity at 10, and then I took pictures and Santa called me a boy. It is understandable if it's anyone else, but Santa would know I'm a girl. Story 42. I'm not sure exactly, but I think it was around 8 or 9 when I figured it out. I actually kept up the act a little longer because my parents enjoyed it, and I didn't want to disappoint them. They ended up confessing through a note one Christmas morning, and I had to admit that I already knew. If I'm fortunate enough to have children, I fully intend to continue the tradition. Story 43. I don't remember how old I was, but my son was 8. He wanted our dog to receive a gift, but it was 2 days before Christmas, and I am a single dad. I couldn't sneak out to do the shopping for Santa, so I decided to tell him on the 23rd rather than on Christmas morning. Story 44. You mean why the guy coming into my mom's room at night isn't Santa stopping by to make sure we are okay and being good? Story 45. I was 7 years old when I found out. It was a cold and snowy Christmas Eve in 1993. I put out milk and cookies for Santa Claus. I said my prayers and went to bed early, hoping I could wake up in the middle of the night to meet Santa. I woke up around 12:30 a.m. and quietly sneaked out of my room, making my way to the living room. The lights were off, but the crackling fire illuminated the house. As I descended the stairs and turned the corner to the living room, I saw it. Santa Claus was standing there in all his glory. I had done it. I was the kid who finally beat the system and got to see the real Santa Claus, not the fake one from the mall. But as fate would have it, I was in for a surprise. As I entered the living room, I saw my mom on the table, and Santa was with her. I could hear her screaming from across the hallway, and this may have been what woke me up. But it gets worse. I thought that Santa was attacking my mom, but he was actually doing something far worse. Santa Claus was clapping my mom's cheeks. Imagine finding out that Santa isn't who you thought he was and also getting the birds and the bees speech on Christmas Eve. But wait, there's more. At this point, I'm sure everyone is laughing about me walking in on my dad dressed as Santa. Here's the thing. When I finally got into the living room, my dad was sitting on the couch drinking a glass of red wine, watching the entire thing. My neighbor Jerry was the one dressed as Santa. I've never been the same since. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my story. There's a fight in the yard, and we're about to get locked down, so I have to hide my phone so they don't find it. Have a good day, everyone, and always remember to smile. Story 46. I don't remember my exact age, but I think I was in kindergarten. My parents made the mistake of wrapping the Christmas gifts with the same paper they kept in the cupboard where I used to hide and play. I recognized it immediately, so I knew Santa was actually them. Story 47. My parents were unkind. The moment I could understand conversations on a basic level, they told me the truth. I don't remember my actual age. All I remember is having no memory of celebrating Christmas while believing he was real. Story 48. I asked my mom why Santa did not equally give to good poor kids as to rich kids. My mom then closed the door to my brother's bedroom and spoke to me. I still feel guilty about that to this day. I think it hurt her to feel she did not do enough for us, which she always did. Little did I know I would spend most of my life asking questions like this about everything. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.